Greetings, Tony Mobley here with a new conversation with Tony Mobley. And tonight I'm having a conversation with with a researcher on medicine and a future Ms. Vienna Tran. Tonight also is the 22nd episode of Conversation with Tony Mobley. So why are we here? We are here because life has provided me the opportunity to have real conversations with real people. First, I want to thank the panelists for the streaming houses of worship conversation that we had last week. I also want to thank the team behind Conversation with Tony Mobley. So what we try to do is have real conversations. Again, I'm talking researcher, Tran, researcher on space medicine, educator, and content creator. We hope to help others with these conversations, but I need your help. I need you to go to conversationwithtonymobley.com, register on that website, and then participate in the Mukana chat, which is a chat that will allow you to ask questions, vote those questions up and down, and so we need you to go and ask those questions and then vote them up and down. Thank you so much. And if you like this and past conversations, please go to YouTube, like, and subscribe. Set that bell for all the notifications and will remind you of upcoming conversations. And so with that, we're going to go to Miss Vienna Tran. And so I want to say welcome. And she is coming to us from the future. So we're just going to let her say a few words before we get into our questions tonight. Thank
Hello,
you, Vienna,
Tony.
for being here.
Hi, it's wonderful to be on your conversation tonight. Well, it's this morning for me. It's actually 11:30 a.m. on Thursday morning. So I am from the future, and I can tell you the future is looking pretty good because I get to be speaking with Tony Mobley. So I'm looking forward to answering some questions that are coming up.
Fantastic. So let's start with the questions. So the first one that has come up is, and these are not based on, these questions that I'm going to ask are based on the number of votes that they've gotten. So Mike Emmett from Melbourne, Australia asks, do you have your own space travel ambitions?
That's a great question, and people ask me that a lot. I would say that I would love to go to space sometime in my lifetime, and I'd like to do something useful in space that's related to my career as a space medicine researcher and future doctor. So I, I think space is a wonderful place to travel to, and it would be nothing like anybody's seen on Earth. So I would love to be able to go to the place that I talk about and think about so often. Whether I would want to go to Mars depends on the amount of infrastructure and research that has been done there, because safety is important to me, and I'd want to go there if there was if there were a purpose for me, and if there were enough things in place, enough systems in place to keep me alive. I'd be part of that, but I think there would be people who would also help me with that. And whether it would be a one-way trip is another question that people ask me. And again, that depends on where I am at that point in my life and where the world is in terms of how far it's progressed with space research. So it's all a lot of it depends, but but I would love to go to space is the answer.
Fantastic. And so we have another question from Mike Emmett from Melbourne, Australia. What analogues do you use for earthbound medical research in low gravity environments? And how accurate can they be with the seemingly massive differential?
this is probably a good opportunity for me to talk about what I do as a researcher. So at the start of last year, I embarked on a journey which was kind of off the beaten track. And what I mean by that is I was doing a medical degree and I decided to take a year off from that degree and do a research degree for a year. And that's called an honours degree. And for that, to pass that, part of it is to write a thesis about a health-related research topic of your choice, provided that you have supervisors willing to help you. And I was fortunate enough to be able to use data from a bed rest study, which was done in Cologne in Germany. Bed rest studies are a very popular and effective analogue that people use to study the effects of microgravity on the human body, because you're eliminating the head-to-toe force of gravity when you're standing up. And so we can study a lot of things that happen to the body when we put people in bed for long periods of time. In our study, our participants were all healthy and they lay in bed for 60 days. That's 2 months of just lying in bed. They were paid, and they were poked and prodded and investigated and scanned. And the point of that was to see not only whether bed rest would affect the body, but whether centrifugation in an artificial gravity environment would help mitigate any of the losses they experienced during bed rest. So for our team, we looked at whether the gluteal muscles, which are really important for standing and moving, whether their losses during bed rest would be mitigated during a 30-minute a day centrifugation treatment. The funny thing is that it wasn't mitigated, and it's probably makes sense because our hip muscles are very used to exerting more than 1G. So when we run, we're putting our hips under 9G, which is 9 times the amount of force that they experience when they're standing quietly. So 1G is not going to do very much. But the point of getting back to the question is that bed rest is a pretty effective analogue. Another one that we use that is not so much to do with the physiological aspects is habitation. So, for example, the Mars Desert Research Station in Utah is a habitat that has been built in the middle of the desert, and people go in there and pretend that they're on Mars in the habitat. And they study things like behavior and daily routines and circadian rhythms and lots of different aspects, more psychologically, that would happen to someone if they were in space. So those are 2 analogues that we use to for people who don't go to space, to research what could happen if you do go to space.
Very cool. Thank you so much for that. And the next question is, office hour members know you as a scientist and as a person who likes to have some fun. But what about you as a runner?
Me as a runner, I think I have a photo that I've sent you of me running. I'll tell you about my running journey because it means quite a lot to me. I started running a little bit when about 6 years ago, and it was because I was really terrible at PE. So let's start from the beginning. I was terrible at physical education. Like in school when they make you run, I wasn't very good at that. So I'd get A's in everything else, but I got C's for physical education, and I kind of didn't mind that. But I eventually thought maybe I should start trying this running thing. And I enjoyed hiking. I enjoyed being in nature. And I enjoyed doing exercise that didn't require lots of preparation and equipment, like say you would in fencing or something, just to use a crude example. So I started running, and I found it was really good for my well-being. It ticked a lot of well-being boxes for me, whether that was physical or mental. And then a good friend of mine told me, if you can run 12 kilometers, you can run 21. So I did 21, which was a half marathon. And then he said, If you can run a half marathon, you can run a marathon. And I'm like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. And then I did one it would have been 4 years ago. So I've been doing marathons then ever since. And that photo that just came up, that was taken at my most recent marathon in August. I chose that photo because I was smiling in it. and I was smiling through the pain because I was at the 30-kilometer mark. And that's one of the most painful parts of the marathon ever, because the closer you get to the end, the better you feel because you know you're at the end. If you're in that awkward middle ground, like say 25 to 30 to 35, it's just smiling through the pain and thinking about the bananas that you get at the end of the race. There's a lot of
Very
life
cool.
lessons to be had in that one photo.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And we have another question from Mike Emmett from Melbourne, Australia. In popular science fiction culture, space medicine is largely about A&E, magic healing devices, and far edge of human cloning with a bit of stasis thrown in. What does the reality of current space medicine look like?
The reality of current space medicine is messy and not glamorous. In the space station, which was designed more than 20 years ago, they've still got some quite archaic devices up there, and the way that they look after the humans, the astronauts, is archaic as well. For example, the way that they go to the toilet is using a hose and a vacuum, and I'll say no more. But the good thing is that they do recycle that urine so that they can save mass when they resupply the space station. So they don't have to resupply with water. It's the perfect closed system and the perfect model of sustainability. It's wonderful. Not glamorous though. Infectious diseases, bacteria and viruses become more pathogenic in space. So we have to be really careful that we don't have any open wounds, or that we maintain cleanliness on the space station. Sleeping is horrible. You can't find a good sleeping quarters. You sleep in a sleeping bag, which you Velcro to the wall or to the ceiling, and there's noise all around you, and you're basically working shifts because there has to be at least one person awake at all times. The International Space Station circles the Earth in 90 minutes, so that can't be very good for your sleep-wake cycle at all. I could go on. And you lose muscle mass and bone mass, which is part of my research. So we've got way more problems than we have answers, and we need to address those problems before you send humans any further.
Yeah, obviously we're not there yet, so we just have to keep looking at the fantasy for right now.
Would you go to space?
Would I go? I don't think that I would go at this point in time. I think that as a young person, I would have definitely wanted to go. But now at this point in time, no. We have another question we have a question from Josh Kaufman. How would you respond to assertions that problems here on Earth should be fixed first? The idea that research money on space could be better spent elsewhere.
I can answer that with one statistic, and that's every dollar that is spent on space, on average, returns $1.50, $1.50 back to Earth. And that is because what we do in space has benefits for Earth. One example is the use of orbit, putting objects in orbit, like satellites, to help us observe the Earth or provide telecommunications or positioning, navigation and timing. All of these services that help us on Earth perform daily tasks more efficiently. So it's not true that they are mutually exclusive. Just because you spend money on space, it doesn't mean that Earth isn't benefited. In terms of medical examples, think about what needs to be taken to the space station. How it costs about $1,000 a pound to send something to space with the rocket system and all. So we have to be very careful about the mass that we send up there, as well as the volume. It's a finite volume. So we innovate smaller, lighter, cheaper things to send to the space station. And where else could they be used? They could be used on Earth too, especially in remote communities and low socioeconomic communities, where having smaller devices that are more easy to use and more affordable for the health system is important. So I absolutely refute the idea that space exploration, research and innovation does not benefit Earth.
Fantastic, and I agree with you. I think you're right on target with that. So we have another question we have a question from VIPOH Resources, Bay Area. Why are STEM careers important to encourage for young women now? How is it different from then?
Absolutely. I think it's probably a historical reason, and that's if we go back to evolutionary times, the men in a caveman family, for example, the men would do the hard work, and the women would be the childbearers and the berry pickers and the people who would maintain the cave, and that's just the way that humans are. And I see a lot of parallels in other animals, and if we continue that trend, then those who went into STEM careers, science, engineering, technology, and maths, they tended to be the brains that could think, that used more logic than emotion, and people who would do things with their hands. And because of likely evolution and cultural reasons, that was more likely to be the males. And that's why there's a disparity between the number of males and females in STEM careers. It doesn't have to be that way. We are really lucky now that we live in a time when we've got equal opportunity, and that I can apply to study engineering in the same way that the person next to me, or you, Tony, or any of my classmates could apply. And thankfully nowadays there's no more discrimination in our first world with regard to what people are allowed to do. And although there's some deep-seated cultural biases that we're still working on, I think we've come a long, long way.
Absolutely. And I want to say to those who are watching and listening, take a good look. This is a young woman who is doing the work. Our next question is from Talak Lopez Waterman. What would it look like for a long-term journey to, say, Mars for the human body? And is this viable?
I think that, firstly, if you start with humans being curious creatures and wanting to explore the world around them, we are going to make it viable. If there's a will, there's a way. So if we assume that it's viable, then what it's going to look like, I think we're going to get there in about 6 months, and that is at the moment with our current technology, that is the fastest that a spacecraft can go from Earth to Mars at closest approach in the orbit around the solar system. When you get to Mars, you probably spend about 6 months there building or exploring, and it would take another 6 months to go back. So at minimum, it would be an 18-month long round trip. For the human body, 6 months is a relatively long time, but it's not the longest that anyone's been in space. People have been in space for a year continuously. So 6 months isn't too bad for the average healthy astronaut. If we take the average person on the street, that's a different story from someone who's been selected specifically to go to space. But if you assume that they are healthy, fit, well, they would lose a bit of bone and muscle mass. They would be psychologically well too. They would have to be able to work together with their teammates and tolerate their teammates for 6 months at least. And then you have the issue of radiation. So the International Space Station is still within the Van Allen belts. So it gets protected from the harmful galactic and cosmic rays that come out from deep space. But going to Mars, if you do an 18-month trip to Mars, I learnt this recently, that's the equivalent of having one CT scan every 5 days. It's also double the lifetime exposure of radiation that's recommended for any human being. So the radiation is something that we really, really need to look at. We need to shield our spacecraft properly, and we need to protect our humans from a nutritional point of view so that the radiation is not going to cause any deleterious effects to the DNA that could be experienced immediately or later. I think that's one of the big things that we're going to have to look at when we go to Mars. When you get to Mars, I think there's going to be a lot of robotics and AI that have helped construct and prepare things so that when humans get there, it's a little bit safer. So I think in terms of computer science and robotics, we're in good hands.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So we have another question for VIPOH Resources Bay Area. Do you have advice for other young women who want to be space doctors?
That's a really interesting question. Advice is you have to create your own destiny. Space medicine is not mainstream, I'm going to tell you that now. And the way that I got to where I am is to seek out the opportunities, because they won't be provided to you in school or in university, or perhaps not even in the family home or among your friends. It's not something that people talk about very often as a job or a career. So you need to be proactive, you need to be brave, you need to have courage to speak to people who are on the same path as you are and a little bit ahead of you. And look at yourself and see what parts of you would you need to work on and improve and enhance to be the best space medicine doctor that you can be. For me, it was communication. I used to be very shy and introverted, and public speaking would be something that I just turned my nose up at. But I realized that you've got to be able to talk, and you've got to be able to tell other people about what you do so that you can inspire them. And that's why I join you, Tony, and I join others to speak to the world about space medicine and what it means to me.
And I am smiling so much right now because that you being shy is the last thing I expected you to say, because you are so bubbly and so full of fun and engaging particularly in our after hours community. So that's interesting to hear that. Next question is, why space medicine?
Now, it starts from when I was about 5 or 6, and my father took me to an observatory about 30 minutes from home to look at the moon. And when I saw the moon and the stars up close through a telescope, I was absolutely fascinated that there were things out there that couldn't be seen by the naked eye, and things that we could possibly reach one day. I mean, every kid loves space, but sometimes other interests might take over as kids get older. For me, space was my one true love. All throughout school, I was talking about space and doing projects about space, and that was the space side of it. In year 10, we do something called we do something where we select careers, and we study careers and decide what subjects we want to do. And for me, I wanted to be an astronomer or an astrophysicist. Some of my role models that I've seen on TV are Professor Brian Cox and Professor Neil deGrasse Tyson. Really, really amazing people who just have a wonderful way of explaining things to the world. And I wanted to be them. And then I realised perhaps that in Australia, the STEM industry wasn't so good back then as it was elsewhere, and we were experiencing this period of brain drain where people from Australia were going overseas to chase their STEM dreams and their space dreams, and that's totally understandable. We probably had interests in other areas. That's changed quite a bit since I was in school, but because of the job environment, I thought I should just try for medicine. I had this stubborn ambition of passing the entrance exam, which is like a problem-solving test, just to see if I could do it. And I happened to pass. And
wow!
Then
Congratulations.
And then I went through the interview process, and then I passed that as well. And I found myself in medicine, and I was like, this was not part of the plan. This was not in the job description. So I spent the first 3 years of medicine feeling quite lost and directionless, actually. I felt so out of place compared to the person next to me who was the cream of the crop, always wanted to do medicine, parents were doctors, that type of person, and big respect to them, but I just didn't know what I was going to do. And then a conference came to Adelaide called the International Astronautical Congress, and when I attended the space medicine track, these were people from all over the world who had come together to talk about various aspects of space. And when I realized that space medicine was a job that existed, I was absolutely hooked. There is a photo that I've sent you, Tony, with me standing next to ex-NASA administrator, Charles Bolden, and he's an ex-astronaut and then worked for NASA. And I took a photo with him and I couldn't believe it. And he said to me, "You can be an expert in your field." And from then on, Charles Bolden had told me basically my destiny. So I have been following that ever since. And here I am. I think it's a wonderful career, and there's never been a better time to aspire to be a space doctor, because human exploration with astronauts is the rate limiting step. We've got the rockets and we've got the engineering and we've got the technology. We just don't know what happens to the human body. So we need more of us. And I hope that more young people will consider space medicine as part of a space career.
Thank you for that. Very cool. Mike Emmett from Melbourne, Australia asks, what influence do you think being a first-generation Australian child of refugee migrants has had on the way you've launched yourself into life, study, and career?
I like the pun, Mike. Kudos to you. Launched myself into life. I hope I can launch to the stars one day. But Tony, I wanted to ask you the same question after I've had my answer, because I think culture in general, whether you've migrated or not, is really integral to who we are and how we see ourselves compared to the people around us. For me, my parents came here when they were 20. I'm not 20 anymore, and I couldn't imagine the hardships they had to go through to escape a war-torn country on a boat, live through a refugee camp, and start a new life here with nothing but the clothes on their back. I just couldn't imagine it. And they have just been such troopers. Troopers is what Australians call people who take on challenges and make it through. So they are troopers. And it's strange having one foot in one culture, my parents, and having one foot in another culture, which is that of my school friends and the people around me in Australia. And like many children who have gone through the same experience, I think there's been conflict there. There absolutely has been conflict within and externally. But as I've gotten older and as I've started to appreciate what my culture has brought to me, I think I like to take the best of both worlds. My parents and their Vietnamese community are generous and kind and hardworking, and I'm really happy to help to emulate that and hopefully pass it on to other people. Certainly, choosing space medicine is probably not something that they envisioned when they had me, but but I think I hope to demonstrate that being born here in Australia and having every possible privilege that I could possibly have here means that I can take my privilege and run with it and do what would satisfy me in my dreams, but also bring a sense of good to the world and give back to the world, leave it a better place than it was before. And that's all I could ever hope for myself and perhaps what my parents would have hoped for. What about you, Tony? How does your culture influence you?
Interesting that you asked me that question. I really hadn't thought about it in a long time. So I will say that I am a child of, I was born in the late 50s, and Jim Crow still existed in the United States at that time. And I remember a lot of times, my father was actually from Orlando, Florida before Disney World. And we would go every summer to Florida for 2 weeks. And I remember very distinctly having to pull off on the side of the road because we weren't able to go to hotels as black people. And you had to kind of know somebody that was along the way that you could stay with, or you would have to just pull on the side of the road. The interesting thing about it is that I experienced a lot of different things in my life. I'm an old guy now, but I've experienced a lot of different things in my life. And one of the things that I'm thankful for is that I lived through that. I experienced the riots. I experienced a lot of the civil unrest that existed in the United States during that time up until now. And I know that we are not in a perfect place, and I know that there is a lot more work to be done. But I will say it is interesting that a child who was born under Jim Crow is actually able to have a conversation with a young lady in Australia. And I think that that is an achievement in society. And so I'm thankful that you asked me that question, so I had a chance to share that. So thank you so much for asking me that question. The next question is, how did COVID-19 impact your work with space medicine?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate actually because during COVID in 2020, I was able to do my data analysis at home and do my writing of my thesis at home and use Zoom to talk to my supervisors, which were, by the way, from Australia, the UK, and Italy, and the States. So it was fun lining up a time to talk to everybody, and it was nice to be able to be in a relatively safe location and not have to be in hospitals during my research degree. I was happy about that. It affected me in other ways, though, because it affected the people that I cared about. I saw businesses closing down. I saw people having to change jobs. I saw people having to compromise with their schooling. I tutor year 12 and year 11 students, and they had to adjust the way that they studied because they had to be at school from home. So because it affected the people around me, it affected me in a way because I'm an empathetic person, and I felt the struggle that they were feeling. And of course, when COVID-19 came out, it was fearful for everybody because people didn't know what was going to happen. So I was afraid to leave the house a lot of the time. I didn't wear masks then because it wasn't mandated, but it was really frightening to come home and to wonder whether I had infected the people who live at home with me, to be worried about that, and then to worry for 14 days after that. So, and then and then you've got the media and the news, which brings out. Which tells you the story every day. It's like a constant drone in your ear of COVID-19. And I wondered, well, the good things in life haven't stopped. They're still there. They're still going to be around. It's just that we're surrounded by an acutely terrible event right now. And in a way, it helped me focus on what was good. And that meant going out in nature, which was very socially distant, connecting with people on Zoom, reaching out to people that I'd not reached out to previously. So in a way, it brought out the best of us, the worst in some of us. But I think we're stronger given we've been through a pandemic like that. And how did it affect you, Tony?
I got to meet you. I got to meet other people in the office hours community. Unfortunately, I have known some people that were very close to me and my family, and church community members who had succumbed to COVID-19. I have mixed feelings about that part of it, but also I can say that there has been a paradigm shift in terms of the way in which we are able to do some of the things that we're doing now currently, particularly, this conversation. I will say that I think that in a lot of ways, technology-wise, COVID-19 was the perfect storm for us to move to a place that we may not have naturally gotten to for 10 years or more. And so from that standpoint, I think that, it was a good thing from that standpoint. But the cost of human life is very precious. So that's of course the downside of it for me and my family. The next question again is from VIPOH Resources Bay Area. What is the best thing about being a doctor of space in your field?
I think the best thing, it's an equal first between the people and the sense of exploration. I feel that I've always been a curious person, and I have always wanted to find out new things that other people haven't found out before, especially if it's off the beaten track. So space medicine is a perfect storm for that. But it's also what I call my space family, because being in the space community, and especially the space medicine community, you get to know people quite well, and you start to see the usual suspects at every single event that you go to, and then they become your friends. So it's really been wonderful making friends that way, and it's helped bring me out of my shell and embrace my weirdness and my difference that is being a total space tragic. So that's what I really like about space medicine.
Very cool. Josh Kaufman. Human health includes both physical and psychological. What psychological challenges need to be addressed for long durations in the restrictive environment needed to sustain life in space?
The psychological challenges are a big one. If you look on the NASA Human Research Roadmap, the psychology of spaceflight is one of the highest priorities of research right now. A, because we don't know very much about it, and B, because it exacerbates some of the things that the human mind does not like the most. That's isolation, confinement, and extremes. If we stick with isolation for a second, imagine how you coped in COVID when you couldn't go outside the house and see people. That is just a taste of what one would feel in a spacecraft living with the same people for months on end. And so to mitigate that, you'd have to select for people who are very psychologically and behaviorally healthy and resilient, and get the team get to know each other before they fly together so that they understand the dynamics. But isolation is a huge one, and I think equipping people with the tools to be resilient and to reach out to each other is going to be paramount. Confinement, similar sort of thing to isolation, but not having the freedom to go where you need to go, perhaps not having the right to privacy on a place like the spacecraft. You'd always be in the vicinity of other people, and for safety reasons, it would probably be an open plan sort of spacecraft. That's just me speculating, but would we be able to have the right to our own private space? And would we have the right to freely choose the activities that we want to do? Or are we going to be addressing mission objectives for 24 hours a day, which is often what they do now? Extremes in accelerations, extremes in microgravity, darkness, light, vibrations on return to Earth or on launch. Lots of different things that push the envelope of what we are capable of or are used to on Earth, and that can be extremely stressful. And as many of us might know, if we experience stress, that manifests in our body, and then we physiologically might be compromised. So it's all very interconnected, psychology and the physical characteristics of spaceflight.
Very cool. Thank you for that answer. And Josh, thank you for that question. Rachael Wood of Avondale, Arizona. Hands-on medicine is a much art as science, and you seem to really enjoy science side of medicine. What appreciation, enjoyment do you have for the art side of medicine?
The art side of medicine, that's funny that you mentioned that, because medicine is considered both a science and an art. I actually enjoy both sides. In fact, when I was explaining before about how I struggled through medicine, it's a very memorisy sort of field. You just have you get given these facts, like this happens and then this happens, or you treat people with this and this drug has this name. There's no logic to it. You just have to commit it to memory. Well, there's very little logic to it anyway. And I was more of a science maths person, so I wanted to apply formulae and equations and principles to situations. So getting used to that style of thinking was difficult for me. During the time that I learnt those things, I enjoyed the art of it because that's something that we have innately. It's not something that I had to memorize or learn in university. And so the art of medicine is a wonderful enjoyment for me because it's about bedside manner and it's about connecting with a human being, much like we are doing now. I do my best to communicate in a way with patients that would suit them best. And that involves not only talking, but also listening to the patient. People say that in the first 7 seconds of seeing someone, you can see what's wrong with them. And that's because if you just listen, if you just pay attention and observe and appreciate the patient before thinking about what you're going to say next, then the diagnosis is already there. And that's an art.
Very cool. I knew you had an artistic nature to you anyway. Our next question is from Jeff of Chicago, Illinois. I bet you read The Martian by Andy Weir. How much fun was that book? And how close to reality do you think it portrays?
Jeff, you've exposed me because I haven't read The Martian, but because of the people that I hang around, I hear a lot about The Martian. It does seem like a lot of fun, and I'm yet to read it, so thank you for reminding me. How close to reality do I think it's portrayed? There's a scene about potatoes in in The Martian, and potatoes have actually been successfully grown on the space station. They are very viable vegetables to be grown, and they're going to provide us with carbohydrates, protein, and fats all together in the one potato. And I think that they're going to be using that food as a staple, along with rice and perhaps beans, perhaps wheat as our source of fuel. So potatoes are very important. One inaccuracy that I do know about is the storm on Mars. On Mars, there are frequent storms, but the way that they portrayed it in the movie, at least, was that it was a very high-pressure storm. The Mars atmosphere is actually very thin. You couldn't breathe in it if you had no spacesuit. So having a storm on Mars would not be like that on Earth, and you would still be able to walk through the storm, and you'd be able to, still perform your daily activities while the storm was happening because there's not much air density there to push you over. So that's just one thing, as well as the gravity. I know it's very hard. I appreciate the difficulty of simulating a partial gravity environment in a movie. But Mars is about 1/3 of Earth's gravity. It's about 0.38 of a g. So you would be kind of bouncing as you walk. And I wonder how that would affect your musculoskeletal system and the way that you move around and you maneuver things. That's something that I guess neither a book nor a movie can really predict until we get there. So really interesting connection between science fiction and reality.
And one of the things I'll say about the movie anyway is that it was obvious that you needed something more than just potatoes to get through. He did make it through, but he obviously needed something more than just potatoes. Okay, we have another question from Josh Kaufman. Hitch your wagon to a star was the 19th century quote that highlights the importance of striving for lofty aspirational goals. Besides the technical rewards, what less tangible benefits arise from the goal of space exploration?
Absolutely. I think it's the satisfaction of our curiosity and the contribution to science. Why do we want to know things? Why do we want to know things that might not be directly relevant to us? Why do we watch documentaries, and why do we learn about animals that don't exist in our country? I just think we love to learn. No matter what age you are and what background you come from, there is always an opportunity and always this hunger to learn about our world, and that extends to space. So that might not be tangible, and you might not be able to make a business case out of a lot of the space exploration that we do. but we can find out things via science. And we have the scientific side. We can search for water on Mars, and we can understand what it's like to live on another world. But it's not just within the STEM field, and it's not just about the left side of the brain. There are space artists out there and space archaeologists. We need graphic designers. We need musicians. We need people who are going to take the idea of space and convert it into something that the rest of us are going to be able to understand and appreciate. Those beautiful pictures that we see of space, some of them are artist impressions, some of them are photos, granted, but we wouldn't be able to visualize the inside of a nebula if it weren't for an artist. And people who make movies about space, and all sorts of people with artistic brains are going to be part of the space community. And these are benefits that are no less tangible than business cases and economic drive. So I think space is a very all-encompassing and multidisciplinary field, and no matter what you're into or what you do, there's a place that you can have in the space community.
Wow, powerful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Josh Kaufman again. As an educator, how do you infect your students with enthusiasm in the subjects that you teach? What challenges do you face, i.e. empathy for subject, understanding of application, or the benefit of the material, or lack of resources, etc.?
That's a great question, Josh. You're too smart for me. And we don't use the word infect in 2021, by the way, but I'll let you off this time. How do you infect your students? How do you influence your students with enthusiasm in the subjects that you teach? I think it's very innate. How do I not do it? It just comes through when I talk about something that I love, and oftentimes a student will come in to have a lesson with me, or I'll speak at the Space Discovery Centre here in Adelaide to a group of people. There's an image that I've sent you of me speaking to people at the centre, which is awesome. A lot of them, they'll come in not looking very enthusiastic and feeling like they have to be there. And after that, when they realise that they've actually understood something, when they have that light bulb moment, that's when they start engaging with the subject. A few tips and tricks that I use is to relate it to their daily life. I had a student who really liked basketball, so I would communicate physics in terms of basketball to them. Or, there's my picture. And sports is something that really gets to kids who play and watch sport. Pets as well, animals. If they have a pet, I ask them about their pet and what does their pet do, and relate that back to their subject. And you really make it really interesting for them. I think if you really care about a person that you're mentoring or tutoring, it shines through naturally. So there's not much thinking that I need to do to engage them. In terms of challenges that I face, it's the school system, and the way that it happens here in Australia is that there are a lot of subjects that students have to learn before they get to year 12, where they have complete choice. And when students are forced to learn something that they can't see the relevance for, then you're already facing a challenge there. The examination system is also, I believe, something that's very stressful, unnecessary, and not representative of the real world. And I'm hoping to see the education system change in that way by allowing students to get more hands-on experience and actually relate school to the world that they live in. That's a challenge that I hope we're going to overcome together.
Very powerful. And I would encourage you to, I know that you are busy and you have your hands full, but I know that we would really appreciate your input in the conversation, not in the conversations, in office hours on Saturdays, where we have educators who come and talk and try to figure stuff out. And they are representative all over the world, and it's not on YouTube, and they just try to figure things out. So I just wanted to extend that invitation to you as well.
Thank you.
Josh Kaufman is back again from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Can you describe a typical day at work, maybe even an atypical one?
A typical day at work for me now is going to be something like this. So I wake up in the morning, snooze the alarm, and wake up again. And eventually I will actually become vertical, and then I will go to the hospital and I will join with my team at the hospital, talk through the patients that we're going to see today, and make a plan and go and see them together on a ward round. And then after we've done the ward round, we do jobs for the patient. So whether that be taking blood or analysing results or sending a patient to a scan, or discharging a patient, that's what we do day to day. And that's going to be my life for the next few years. When I go home from that job, however, that's when the real fun begins, because then I'll probably speak with my research team, or I'll speak to a student who has asked me for some help or some guidance with careers. I'll get on after hours and I'll say ahoy to everybody, which makes me feel really happy. I'll go for a run, and I'll make a really simple meal for dinner, and then I'll just perhaps read a book, watch a movie, or answer emails, and then I'll go to sleep. And that's what a typical day at work is. At this stage in my life, there's a lot of things that I have to do that are constrained, like work. Work is going to be the most important thing to me. But when I'm not at work, then I'm having fun. And I hope that I never have to lose that for my job. I'd like to still maintain a balance of work and fun all the time.
Very cool. Mike Emmett from Melbourne, Australia asks, you are valued and loved member of Office Hours community. How did you come to be there and find your place there?
That's a lovely question. Tony, I'd like to ask you about that as well at the end of my answer. But how did I come to find my place there? I don't know. people welcomed me. I didn't insert myself like deliberately into the community. I kind of came and listened in. I started with what we call lurking, which is where you don't turn your video or your microphone on. You just listen to what people have to say. And then I turned my video on for the first time, and then Alex says, "Hi, Vienna." And then I have to talk about what I do and all that. And as the more appearances that I make, the more people that I get to know. And I get to know them from a technical perspective and what they're good at, but also them as a human being and the way that they interact. And I love doing different scenarios or talking about hypothetical scenarios with my friends on after hours. It's a lot of fun. And I like being on the panel in office hours as well. The questions that I can't answer all the questions, but I can answer some of them. And I just hope it helps. It's good speaking practice for me, so it's actually really a selfish endeavor. But I have been so grateful to be welcomed into this community. It's all you guys. I didn't have to do anything to feel welcome. It was just everybody's kindness and sense of welcoming, including you, Tony, so thank you. But how did you get into it?
Well, it's a long story, but I'll try to make it real short. So at the time, just before the pandemic officially started, I was diagnosed with cancer. And during the beginning of that cancer treatment, I heard Alex Lindsay talking about office hours on MacBreak Weekly, and I also saw a few tweets from him on Twitter about office hours. And so I came in and I was embraced by a member of office hours who's no longer with us. His name was Mike Andrews. And I came on with horrible cameras. I mean, a old MacBook Pro in the bedroom, lights crazy, silhouette. And he continued to encourage me to be on. And I felt horrible about being on camera, but I kept being encouraged to be on camera. And so they allowed me to hang around. And so I stayed. And I was able to start getting a little bit better. And I I love the heart and the spirit of office hours from this standpoint, Vienna. One of the things that has allowed Conversation with Tony Mobley to exist is that the heart of office hours has been that regardless to where you are, regardless to your politics, regardless to your religion, regardless to the way you look, you are embraced and you're encouraged. This community is built around the idea of video production. But the fact of the matter is that it goes beyond video production. And because it was able to break down barriers, because it was able to break down walls, I wanted to be in a position to share the heart and spirit of what happens in office hours with the larger community. And so that is why Conversations with Tony Mobley exist. And so I think that this is the first time that I've actually shared this on Conversation with Tony Mobley. But essentially, the idea is that, I was told that this was naive, that you shouldn't try to do this, and this is unrealistic. And as a person who understands my mortality is not too far away, I said to myself, why not have an opportunity to engage with people? And I'm so glad that I did. And I'm so glad that office hours supported me. And I'm so glad that I'm able to have a conversation with a person like you who's on the cutting edge of being able to do space medicine, who is engaging and personable, and who I'm learning even more things about tonight. And there are so many other members of the office hours community that have similar stories and that are doing increasingly wonderful things in their individual communities. And it is what Alex Lindsay says all the time, a global conversation where nobody is left behind. And I know you didn't ask me for all of that, but you opened the door, and so I walked in a little bit. And so thank you for asking me the question. So the interviewer interviews the moderator. So here we go. So thank you. Thank
You're
Vienna,
absolutely welcome. I mean, it is a conversation with Tony Mobley. It's not a monologue to Tony Mobley. So
Well, you're right.
I want to learn about you too.
Well, thank you for that. And so I hope that is helpful to those who are listening and watching, and will watch the replay. Yeah. So this is, why not? That was one of the things you said earlier today. Why not? Why not have the conversation? And the other thing too about it is this. If you think about it from the standpoint, this is being done through Video Ninja, and there's AWS and all these other technical things and tools and overlays and graphics and all of these wonderful things. But the heart of the matter is that there is something about what has happened in office hours, and there is a heart aspect to this whole thing. And I don't want to get preachy, but there is a spirit, there's a force that's going on that is beyond even the technology that's being used. And I'm going to stop there and just go to the next question by Charles Klein. And he says, what are your thoughts on gene sequencing technologies like CRISPR, and what could be its impact on space research?
Charles, I love that question. At the Space Discovery Centre, we have an ethics station where people can come and answer questions that make them think. And there's no right or wrong answer to this. But one of the questions that I can think of is about genetic modification. How far would you be willing to go if you wanted to go to space? Would you be willing to leave your family and your dog? Would you be willing to eat out of a packet, pureed food? Would you be willing to get your appendix removed like they do when you winter in Antarctica? Because if you have appendicitis in the middle of Antarctica, you don't have any help. Would you be willing to do that? Would you be willing to lose a part of your body? What other parts of your body would you be willing to leave behind so that you could be safer when you went to space? Would you be willing to get genetic modification? This is what CRISPR is, modifying your own genes so that you could be safer in space, so that you could cope with the effects of the space environment. Like, could you genetically modify yourself to not lose so much bone and muscle mass, or to not faint if you are suddenly put under a high level of G, or to not become psychotic under isolative conditions? So there's so many dangers of spaceflight that we could possibly modify using CRISPR. Now, there's a lot of red tape to that. There's a lot of red tape to even trying to answer that question. When scientists want to answer a question and do some research, they need to submit a proposal to a governing body of some sort. And that governing body has to decide, is it a good use of money? Is it going to benefit a lot of people? Is it ethical? Is it financially viable? Is it all of these things, all of these barriers that that may come up when you try to be adventurous and answer a question like this? I have no doubt it's going to happen some way or another. We are going to investigate whether genetic modification will help the human being survive. It's going to take a long time, though, with all of that, all of those barriers. I think it's going to be very interesting. I'm conflicted about the ethics. I'm conflicted about whether we should be allowed to childbear and pass on our genetics to children who have not consented to be born into a dangerous environment, and whether those genes would be even passed on. There's a lot of complexities there, but I think somebody's going to help answer those questions, because we're curious. We need to find out. We can't just hold back. So I think those are my thoughts.
Wow. Thank you for that. The next question is from Roscoe from Brea, California. Who has been your mentor in space and in life, and how do you hope to mentor the next generation?
I've had a lot of mentors over the years. I don't know if they'll ever see this video, but shouting out to Rowena, Brett, Ross Philpott and Kingsley. They are doctors who are either space medicine researchers or huge space enthusiasts who have reached out to me and been willing to guide me on my own road. They are people in a way who have been who have trodden part of the path that I've trodden, but maybe in a slightly different direction or a slightly different time. And I put so much value into people's wisdom and experience. So I'm glad that there are people like me out there, and I consider anybody who's willing to pass on their wisdom as my mentor. That includes Carl Asmussen. He's my best friend and one of my closest mentors, and he's a frequenter of office hours, and he's taught me a lot about how to improve my persona and my skills to be able to understand the space industry and how to get into it. So shout out to him as well. I have so many mentors I can call mentors that I wouldn't be able to count right now. How do I hope to mentor the next generation? By emulating the people who have mentored me, and by being absolutely selfless about it. When kids want to speak to me for 2 hours on Zoom when they've just met me about how space medicine works, I just do it. This is something, the value that I get out of it is I benefit from mentoring in the same way that they might benefit from mentoring. So it is absolutely a two-way street. And I hope that it's only my best hope that I can pass that on to the next generation and leave something behind, so that when I'm not around, then they can carry that on, and so that I have an impact on whoever is interested in learning about space, medicine, and life. So that's how I hope to do it.
Very cool. The next question is, can you talk about your future projects?
The one thing that comes to mind that's not space related is being in the remotes band. I enjoy being in the office hours remotes band. I think I got coerced into it, but I've loved it. And there's a picture that I've sent to you, Tony, about that. It's me in a studio set up with Carl was the person taking the photo, but I was providing some vocals for one of the office hours songs. Lots and lots of fun. And I was also playing recorder for an office hours remotes band song and the viola as well. So my musical background was useful for something. And I hope to continue being part of the band for many years to come. It's lots of fun. I learned lots about GarageBand and AV and all of that set up as well, which is what you said, is they are just tools to tell a story. They are not stories within themselves, but they are tools. Having a good grasp of how to produce music, as well as what goes on behind the scenes of producing that music, I think is going to be really wonderful for me. Other future projects on After Hours, shout out to Husso and Mike Emmett. We're just basically the class clowns of After Hours, and I apologise in advance, but I don't really, because we have so much fun thinking about different scenarios and acting out different hypotheticals. Always about AV. We always relate it back to AV, but there's just something, I think there's like a podcast or a show that's going to be born out of the fun that we have on After Hours. I can feel it. Future projects in terms of, I'm so excited. And I'm sure you've got lots in the works as well for yourself, Tony.
I'm doing my best job of trying to further conversation with Tony Mobley right now, and it's a challenge. But I'm so thankful for the support of the office hours community, and in a lot of different ways. Yeah. I have lots of faith in you too, Tony. Future projects in terms of space, I just want to keep upskilling. Here is where I upskill and improve my research skills, improve my networks. There's a chance that I'll be participating in a bed rest study as a researcher mid next year, so it'll be similar to what I explained before, and all of that data will come together and form a big sample size. So but really, short term, I just want to be the best doctor that I can while working in a hospital, and that will put me in good stead to be a space doctor one day. Very cool. Thank you so much for that. Please talk about being a female scientist.
I'm grateful that I live in a time where there's a lot more acceptance for the different people in all different sorts of careers. I'm fortunate that I've been accepted into that community. Part of it is the culture around me, but part of it is that I have to have courage as well, and I have the confidence and the belief in myself that no part of my demographic is going to affect the contribution that I make to science, and that helps a lot. I do have to say that it's nice being among other female scientists who have a really nice, caring nature, and we can talk about things that such as what it's like to say be a female in space, right? Because the female human body, less than a fifth of the people who have been to space are women. So I would be really interested to know how the human body is different in space, whether you're a male or a female. And we do need female advocates in science to advocate for the astronauts who go to space who are women. So I think that the more that we have people who are different and from different backgrounds and different genders, the better it's going to be for research in general.
Very cool. Thank you for that. Daniel Goldstein of Baltimore, Maryland asks, who is your favorite Star Trek doctor and why?
I haven't seen Star Trek. I'm going to be real honest right now. I have not seen Star Trek, but I'm sure the doctors on there are amazing. Have you seen Star Trek, Tony?
Oh yes, I am a Trekkie.
All right. Tell me about your favorite doctor.
I like all Star Trek, new and old. I love it all, and so I don't know that I have a favorite doctor. I guess I'll just have to go with the first doctor on Star Trek, and that's Dr. McCoy. So, and why? Because he presents himself as an old country doctor in the midst of this world of the 23rd century with all this amazing technology. And so I just thought it was an interesting contrast. So that's the way I'll answer that question. The next question is from Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Robotics probes arguably can go further and deeper into the cosmos and have provided a wealth of knowledge. What is a good argument for the expense of sending humans into space? What can humans do that intelligent machines cannot?
Humans can apply complex reasoning and emotion to decisions that involve other humans. Our intelligent machines are only as good as the humans that create them. And if intelligent machines are to make decisions, that is only because a human has told them to make a decision based on those parameters. But there is always a human behind the scenes of any intelligent machine. What is a good argument for the expense of sending humans into space? If the machine goes and the machine breaks, there is no contingency. There needs to be a human there to think on the spot under pressure. And I mean, we've got an intelligent machine right here. So we are the governing machine that is going to be the master of the robotic equipment that we send to space. So I think we need a combination of both. Robots are good for areas where it may not be so safe to build or it may not be so safe to explore. We can sacrifice robots for that to an extent. With humans, life is more precious in a human, we could argue, but humans will always be part of the equation when it comes to human exploration. It's not robot exploration for a reason. Astronauts are not robots, they're human beings. We have to go, and we will be supported by robots. We'll work in tandem.
Very cool. Next question is, what are you most concerned about for the future?
This is going to get a little bit deep, and I think I might be going against the grain here, but we have machines of mass destruction in the form of servers and electrons whizzing through wires, in the form of large corporations that want to not mine your data, but that want to take your data and sell it and feed you things that they think you want to read. And I worry about our younger generation with that. As adults, I think we're able to use a bit of independent thought, and we do. There is a time that we remember where we were connected completely with reality, but I think a lot of our young people spend a lot of time not in reality, connected to the internet and speaking to their friends via text, which is not a very high fidelity way of connecting with others, with other humans in general. So this is very hard to explain for me because I worry about the kids who they come in through the Discovery Centre, they do a circle of the gallery for 10 minutes and then they're back on their phone because they were distracted, their mind was divided. I worry about divided minds because I think it's going to be a cause of an epidemic of mental health conditions, isolation, confinement and extremes, and perhaps a lack of connection to community. I hope that we can use technology for good and that we can connect with community in combination with technology going forward.
Thank you for that answer. Talak Lopez Waterman asked a question from YouTube that's actually from Beauty Bubble. And the question is, how is faith integrated with space medicine? Thank you.
Hi, Rachel. Happy to answer your question. I think that faith is an integral part of a lot of people on Earth. And as more people of more backgrounds go to space, faith is going to be a consideration because it's so integral. And to cater to all different faiths and to allow for faith to happen and people to engage in their own faith before, during and after flight is going to be important, and it's going to allow for greater access and a greater diversity of people who go to space. So I think just as it was really interesting, I went to a place called International Space University and we were designing habitats on Mars. We're designing cities on Mars, actually, and what sort of buildings, what sort of facilities you would need to put in an urban community where you'd have your hospital, you'd have your shops, you'd have your play space. But almost every group in the room drew something like a house of worship as part of a city on Mars. We just need that. It is part of it. And I'm not just saying that because Adelaide is the city of churches, because every corner that you go to, there's a church. But we need a place for spirituality. Whether you have faith in a deity or whether you're a spiritual person, I think that's going to be part of our well-being. So that needs to be considered when we build things, when we create countermeasures for humans. And for physical, psychological, social well-being, we do need to be able to practice our faith.
I think that's a great answer. Thank you so much for sharing that. Douglas Carmichael, his question is, what potential do you see in small satellites, CubeSats, for example, democratizing space?
Here's the simple answer. CubeSats are actually, if you put up that image of me holding a CubeSat frame to an audience, you'll be able to see how small a CubeSat actually is. I have a ruler here. A CubeSat is 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters in length and height and 10 centimeters deep. It's a cube this big. I can hold it. You can send that to space. You can put electronics in it. And you can put solar panels, you can put communications, lots of different devices in it and send it to space. Satellites weren't always like that. They were the size of a room decades ago. And now that they're so cheap, small, easy to use, easy to make by schools, universities, individuals, businesses alike, you can pop that on a rocket for a lot cheaper than you used to be able to, and you can send that satellite to space and collect data that you want. And that's becoming more and more accessible. So that's how I see these small innovations democratizing space.
Okay. Our next question is, it's actually a question from Mr. Keenan Campbell from Princeton, Illinois. And you have really kind of answered this question, but I'm going to ask it again, and maybe if you want to add something to your earlier answer. What first interested you in space medicine?
Well, being interested in space from a young age and also wanting to help people at a large scale. practicing medicine is very rewarding for me. Although I'm an introvert, I love connecting with people when my purpose is to help them. And I really open up when I can do that. So when I combine those two things together, the exploration and the altruism, I think space medicine is the perfect interest.
Thank you for that. Sky Gleason from Seattle, Washington asks, why does Tony think you are funny, Vienna? And what is your attitude about humor?
Tony, why do you think I'm funny?
I think you are funny because I think you are authentic, and that and you have a way of sharing ideas and perspective. And I was going to tell us an office hours story, but I think I'll share that in after hours. But you have demonstrated time and time again that you have a great sense of humor, and you don't mind letting others know that you have that great sense of humor.
I'm really glad you appreciate that, because everybody has different humor tastes. So I'm glad that I can humor you. What is my attitude about humor? It is a very, very mature way of bringing joy to people and coping. We often, without knowing, we use humor to be able to cope with the troubles that we have and make light of a situation that would otherwise be serious and unattractive to talk about. So I think humor is extremely important. Laughing biologically generates endorphins in our body that are good for us, and and I think that's many arguments to be able to laugh and use humor with each other. I think it's really important.
Thank you for that. I hope that answers your question, Sky. Douglas Carmichael asked, I remember in an article that one reason why there is a leave the area alert before engine ignition in that the sound waves themselves can stop a human heart. Is that true?
Not that I've heard. I would have to look that up, Douglas. That's a very, very interesting point you've made. The way that we stop a human heart is electrically, not with sound waves bringing kinetic energy to the body. The human heart is a very, very independent organ that moves via electrical signals. So that's the only way that we do it traditionally. But I would have to look it up and see.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
Okay. What lessons have you learned from your parents that you are using today?
Work hard, be kind to people, and respect your elders. And I know that sounds heaps lame coming from a Gen Z, but I think they bring so much wisdom and experience that we have no idea what other people have been through. And I like to say that, the map of the world is right under your nose, and that's for two reasons. It's because, you can look down at your feet and you can look up at the world and you can navigate where you're going from there. We also have our mobile devices where we can look at maps, but we also have our mouth. Our mouth is right under our nose. If we want to learn about the world, all we need to do is ask. And I love finding out more about my culture and talking to my uncles and aunts and grandparents about what life was like for them, because although it's completely different from mine, it's still part of me and my history.
Absolutely. Can you speak to what motivates you?
People around me and the hope that I'll be able to find out something that no one ever has been able to find out. I honestly think I get a lot of good energy from people who emulate what I want to emulate. So whether that be kindness, whether that be a good sense of humour, diligence, generosity, curiosity, I honestly think I'm just a product of the people around me. So I'm just lucky to have those people who can be my role models.
Very cool. The next question is, you have a great sense of humor, and this question comes from Tony Mobley. So you have a great sense of humor. Where or who did it come from?
Mike Emmett. No, I'm joking. I just wanted to put that in there. I think, again, it's to do with, and I'm not going to deny people that everyone has good times and bad times, and to cope with the bad times, you use humor, whether that is looking up stand-up comedy on YouTube or popping into after hours and making a joke and having people laugh at me. I really enjoy having that effect on people.
Thank you for that. Douglas Carmichael is back, and he says, I've heard that one reason why you hear a crackling sound when a rocket engine has ignited is because the sound waves are folding on top of themselves and in the atmosphere or distorting. Can that happen outside of the electronic realm?
Good question, Douglas. It does happen outside of the electronic realm. That's the way that it happens. So if you're a distance away from a rocket launch, and that launch is so loud, and the sound waves are simply air particles that are moving closer together and further away from each other, and closer together and further away from each other again. And the frequency at which they move like that is how you get sound in your ears. That's why you can't hear sound if you're in space. So I'd imagine that because the rocket engines are so loud, this sort of motion, the frequency at which the wavelengths or I guess the waves will be superimposed on top of each other, and that's how you would hear the crackling. It's a physics thing. I hope that helps answer your question, but sound waves are actually just air particles moving.
Thank you, Douglas, for the question. And Vienna, thank you for the answer. Josh Kaufman from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Okay. So we have another YouTube question by Eric Potter. And the question is, are there new and unexpected medical conditions? I'm sorry. Hold on one second. Are there new and medical conditions / problems arising due to the conditions of space flight? And that's from Eric Potter.
Are there new and unexpected ones? So one thing that freaks everyone out is SANS, or space flight acquired neuroocular syndrome. In space, our fluids shift up towards the head and the neck, and they cause a pressure on the back of the eyeball and the optic nerve, which connects our eye to the brain. Normally that optic nerve is nice and straight, but because of the increased fluid pressure, it gets kinked and it gets curly and loses its shape. So that causes all sorts of vision problems: long-sightedness, short-sightedness, possible blindness in certain cases. And the crazy thing is we don't have glasses in space. You can't go to your optometrist when you're in space. So astronauts actually take a variety of glasses up to the space station in case that happens. But I'd imagine that in the future we'd have to 3D print our own glasses to suit the way that our eye changes in space. So pretty spooky. There's so many other unexpected things. I could talk for ages about them, but that's one that comes to me.
Thank you for that. So we have Josh Kaufman. What is the best preparation for someone contemplating space travel, either for study, development, or exploration, training, research, or personal development?
All of that. Train your personal skills, your skills with people. Run marathons. I think it'd be good on your CV. Do research, show that you're keen to find out things and answer questions, and work together with other researchers to produce publishable work. personal development, network with people, connect with people who are on the same journey as you, and they will be a wealth of experience. Together, everybody achieves more. If you have a network, just like a spider's web, they will connect you to more people than you could ever find yourself connecting to on your own. That would be my idea of preparation. And, sometimes it's just luck. So you're not in control of everything. Sometimes you might win a lottery and go to space. And that's just the way that the world is.
And I would just add one thing to what you said, and I know that you do this. Have a thirst to want to know new things.
Absolutely.
And I think this is the last question, and it's actually from me. So you are speaking to the world. What do you want them to know?
Nobody ever made a difference by being the same. So don't be afraid to be different in whatever way you want. Just be kind to others in the process.
All I can say, thank you so much for being here with me tonight. And give you a hand clap for being on here tonight with me and sharing your thoughts and answering these great questions that we got from the attendees and the office hours community. I want to thank everyone so much for these great questions. Vienna, thank you so much. You are truly a very special person, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to participate in this conversation with me. And as you say, a conversation and not a monologue. So thank you so much, Vienna, for that. I want to give special thanks to Kimberly Mobley, the Global Family and Friends, Alex Lindsay and the Office Hours members, Cloud Bedrock LLC, the DVE Store, Liminal Entertainment Technologies, Byte Hive, Video360.com, ApproveForLoan.com, Mr. Ken Jordan Elms Park, Jonas Dattel, Aaron Huselich, Cherrick Cheetah, David Brady, Marcus Lee Folk, Richard Lavery, Chris Fenwick, Manolo Lozano, Jeffrey Powers, Talak Lopez Waterman, Conversations with Tony Mobley, producer. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Vienna, for doing the good work. Thank you, Vienna. Our featured guest next week is Mr. Dean Anthony, stage director, educator, and a man who wears many hats. Please come and find out about him next week. Coming soon, more interesting conversations, more educators, filmmakers, musicians, other creators. We are having more conversations with real people. Conversation with Tony Mobley engages in real conversations. Please like, please subscribe. And you have an invitation to come to After Hours, which is a part of the Office Hours community, and we will have a conversation there. And again, everyone, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much. Take care. Good night. See you next week. Conversations with Tony Mobley. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.